All right, good afternoon, everybody. Let me start with an update on the SG's travel. Today at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, the Secretary General spoke at the launch of former U.S. Vice President Al Gore's Climate Trace Initiative, which seeks to track global greenhouse gas emissions. The Secretary General said that initiatives like this one will be ushering in an era of radical transparency for emissions tracking, making it more difficult to greenwash or to cheat, as he said. And he added that this should be a wake-up call for governments and the financial sector, especially those that continue to invest in and underwrite fossil fuel pollution. The Secretary General also heard from his Youth Advisory Group and the COP27 Youth Constituency. He stressed to them that their activism in the streets and on social media is crucial to the fight against climate change. He urged them to not give up and promised he wouldn't give up fighting the cause either. Turning to Ukraine now, our humanitarian colleagues there are concerned about an increasing number of incidents involving mines and explosive ordnance, particularly affecting people in areas where Ukraine recently regained control. Our colleagues say they received reports of at least 5 incidents in the first 2 days of November alone, all in the Kharkiv region, compared to 4 similar cases in the second half of October. Since the beginning of the war, hundreds of civilians have been killed, injured, or maimed due to accidents involving explosive ordnance. Yesterday, for example, 2 people were killed and 2 others injured while doing repair work on a road in Chuhuivsky district in the part of the Kharkiv region recently retaken by Ukraine. Accidents involving farmers that are trying to get back to their land until recently under Russian control are becoming increasingly common, our colleagues say. 8 organizations are supporting authorities to increase awareness about the risk of mines in Ukraine, which was already one of the world's most mine-contaminated countries even before February. Together, the UN and our partners have reached more than 3 million people with critical information about the risk of mines, in addition to demining and services to support survivors. Authorities tell us that more than 150,000 explosive devices have already been removed and destroyed since March 2022, but there are millions more. Clearing landmines in Ukraine could take decades, they say. We also have an update now from South Sudan, where the Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and the Chef de Cabinet of the Secretary General, Courtney Rattray, concluded their 4-day visit with a press conference today in Juba. Mr. Lacroix noted the positive steps made in the peace process, but he stressed that more needs to be done to fully implement the revitalized peace agreement and to ensure that free, fair, and credible elections can be held at the end of the transitional period. He expressed concern over the persistent intercommunal violence in many areas of the country, in addition to an already dire humanitarian situation which has been exacerbated by devastating floods. Mr. Lacroix emphasized the importance of keeping the situation in South Sudan high on the international agenda on the humanitarian front, as well as a commitment to supporting the implementation of the peace agreement that will lead to a stable and durable political environment, peace, and development. On the next leg of his trip, Mr. Lacroix will travel to Sudan, to Khartoum, for meetings with government officials about the situation in Abyei. He will also discuss with local authorities and local communities the ongoing efforts to protect civilians, to promote peace, and to facilitate humanitarian assistance. From the Central African Republic now, our peacekeeping colleagues tell us that they are continuing to support the national authorities in preventing and reducing violence at the community level. The peacekeeping mission, MINUSCA, says that preparations for the next phase of the program to reduce violence at the community level are underway. The mission has registered more than half of the 4,300 people, including 1,200 women, who will take part in it. This program offers people, including young people, an alternative to violence through vocational training, income-generating activities, and voluntary surrender of weapons. Separately, the mission is also helping to organize the Bangui Court of Appeals' second criminal session of the year. Let me say that again. So separately, the mission is also helping to organize the Bangui Court of Appeals' second criminal session of the year. And overall, the security situation in the country has remained relatively calm in the past few days, though tense in certain parts of the country. UN peacekeepers are patrolling to protect the population and to secure fragile areas, with nearly 1,700 patrols carried out over the past week, including some jointly done with the Central African Armed Forces. And now back here this morning, you heard the Security Council held an open meeting on Libya, and council members were briefed by Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. And after a short dry spell, I'm happy to thank our friends in Podgorica for sending a check with Montenegro's dues to this year's regular budget. Their payment takes up to 136 fully paid up member states. And I have one final note for you. I'm really honored to tell you about a forthcoming event which some of you, maybe all of you, might like to attend. On the 16th of November, 5 new members will be inducted to the New York Journalism Hall of Fame. One of them will be our very own Edie Lederer, Bureau Chief at the UN for the Associated Press. The New York Journalism Hall of Fame was conceived as a lifetime achievement award recognizing reporters, writers, correspondents, editors, publishers, and media executives whose work had made a significant contribution to American journalism. I think there's no doubt about your own contribution, Edie. So we're delighted that you are to receive this award, and please accept our congratulations. And if I may add, just on a personal note, the first time that I set foot at the UN 20 years ago as a pretty young journalist working for Canadian media, when I first heard about you, met you, I must say that I was very impressed and always looked up to you, as I'm sure many young journalists and people here in this room probably do. So congratulations. We're very happy for you. And on this happy note, I will take your questions.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really am thrilled at this honor. And perhaps even more so because I will be the first correspondent from the Associated Press to get this honor.
That's fantastic.
I had 2 questions.
Yes.
First, the Secretary General is going to the ASEAN summit in Phnom Penh. Mm-hmm. The summit's main focus is going to be on Myanmar. What is the Secretary General's message going to be on that issue?
We will share his remarks under embargo as soon as we get them. As you said, he just left Sharm el-Sheikh this morning, and he's going to make his way to Phnom Penh in the coming hours to meet the ASEAN summit. I think his message, he will reiterate in his remarks there, his message that we've been echoing since the beginning, since the coup there, calling for restoration of power. But, his remarks, as we share them, will have a lot more details.
Okay, and secondly, there's a new outbreak of fighting in Ethiopia between the government and the Oromo National Liberation Front. Does the Secretary General have any comment on that renewal of fighting?
We call for calm and restraint. And of course, negotiations on this other part of conflict in Ethiopia, negotiations are ongoing. We're very much hoping that progress is made quickly so that humanitarian assistance can resume at in an expanded capacity as soon as possible. Ibtisam.
Thank you. And first, congratulations, Edith. It's well deserved. Let me go to my first question is about Egypt and things you said yesterday, but also in the past, which for me, it is not, I didn't hear, I know you referred us to Mr. Turk's statement, and you said that the SG talked to the Egyptian. First part of my question, you talked all the time about informal meeting. Why is this like different from a formal meeting? And then my question is, what's actually your statement on Ala Abdel Fattah? Are you calling on his immediate release? What exactly you are calling for? Thank you. And I have another question on a different subject.
Okay. No, I think the issue, as I mentioned yesterday and the day before, the SG in the we call that an informal meeting because this was just the way that it happened in these circumstances. I won't go into more details on this, but of course, when I say that the SG raised the issue, it was really to echo and to emphasize our call for his release.
To ask for,
yeah.
To ask for
Mm-hmm.
release.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I have another question on the U.S. ambassador, U.S. representative for the UN Management and Reform, Chris Lu, issued a statement today. It is in the context of the U.S. District Court sentence of Karim El-Kurani, a former United Nations employee, to 15 years in prison for dragging and sexually assaulting of one victim and making a false statement to cover up another sexual assault. And also he also admitted to dragging other 17 additional victims, etc. So in his statement, Mr. Liu called the UN to undertake a similar review and also to investigate, the investigation should examine, I'm quoting, whether UN officials were aware of Mr. Al-Kruni's misconduct and failed to take appropriate action, including ensuring the availability of accessibility of assistance to survivors. Any comments on that?
So we have just seen the statement as well. We take note of the statement. We take accountability for misconduct very seriously, and it's also important to note that we're constantly trying to improve our approach to both prevent abuse, ensure accountability. And, you know, as we said on the day that the sentencing happened, we really welcome the efforts of the United States authorities to ensure that Mr. Karim El-Kurani was held to account for his criminal conduct. And we also saluted the courage of the women that came forward to initiate the investigations. And we hope that the sentencing at the time brought some comfort to these women. And I may have more for you a little bit later. The statement just came out, and I'm in touch with other colleagues to have a bit more on this. Yes, James.
Congratulations, Edie, first. Sorry, I'm going to push you a little bit more on the case of Ala Abdel Fattah, because it's just probably the way it's just come about each day. We pushed you on this case, and each day you've sort of nodded when we said, are you calling for his immediate release? Could you say for the podium, could you read it into the record that the UN is calling for Ala Abdel Fattah's immediate release because his life is at stake, and you haven't actually said the words?
I think, you know, the way that I said it, let me rephrase it. When the information that I got from the SG's encounter with the president was that, yes, this issue was raised and that he called for his release.
Okay. Reports from Kherson suggest, or the Russians are now saying, that they are pulling out of the city of Kherson, which is the big regional capital, the only big regional capital that they managed to conquer since their invasion in February. One, what is the UN's response to what could be a pretty important development in the war in Ukraine? And secondly, what preparations is the UN making, given that you have not been given any access to Russian-occupied areas, Are you pre-positioning people, supplies and whatever, so that you could do a humanitarian push into Kherson once it is free of Russian forces?
Yeah, so I was in touch with our humanitarian colleagues in Ukraine this morning on this exact issue. Again, this is very early on. We don't know exactly, yet how things will finally unfold, but the information that I have is that indeed supplies are being pre-positioned, and UN humanitarians will be ready to provide humanitarian assistance to people as soon as we receive the safety guarantees that allows UN colleagues to go in.
I have several others if you want to.
Why don't I go with, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'll speak with Ukraine. November 19 deadline is nearing for the grain deal to expire. So I'm just wondering if the UN has heard anything from the parties about their intentions, whether they will renew the deal or not, particularly Russia. Have you heard anything from the Russian authorities?
Yeah. So first of all, what I can tell you is that we continue to urge parties to continue exerting full and good faith in the implementation of the initiative and to facilitate the timely, safe, and unimpeded movement of vessels. As we mentioned before, this is a critical supply line and it needs to continue delivering more and much needed food to the world. There is something else that I can also tell you is that the Secretary General of the UN Conference on Trade and Development, Rebecca Greenspan, and the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Martin Griffiths, they will be meeting with a high-level delegation from the Russian delegation on November 11th in Geneva, so that is in 2 days, Friday. They will continue ongoing consultations in support of the efforts by the Secretary General, our own Secretary General, on the full implementation of the two agreements signed in Istanbul on July 22nd. So this is a new development on the negotiations.
Just a quick follow-up. Can you tell me if the UN has received any info from Russia regarding their intentions? Have they informed the UN? Did they say, apart from these upcoming negotiations, consultations in Geneva, did they tell anything about their intentions to the UN?
At this point, I will leave it at this. Negotiations are really ongoing. There's going to be this meeting in 2 days, so let's not prejudge what will happen at this meeting. Yes. Yes, please.
Kurush Ziabari, commercial fellow and Asia Times correspondent in Iran. So the Reporters Without Borders has just released a report saying that more than half of the journalists who are arrested in Iran and have been detained since the beginning of the protests in September are women. And there are more women and female journalists behind the bars than at any point in time in the past. And two of these journalists are also actually facing accusations that might carry death penalty according to Iran's penal code. Have you been following the situation of journalists in Iran? Do you have any reactions as the United Nations?
You said who published this report?
Reporters Without Borders.
Oh, sorry?
RSF, Reporters Without Borders.
Okay, very good, thank you. So about the situation of journalists in Iran and around the world, of course, we promote free press. It's very important, and also impartial and sorry, my English is failing me on good judicial proceedings, free and fair and impartial. Yeah. Yes, Stefano.
Thank you, Stephanie. I had to ask again if in the meeting between Secretary General Guterres and Prime Minister Meloni, the issue of migrants was touched, because the Italian Prime Minister is now saying that practically Italy is respecting international law, because those are not castaway people. These are migrants and those ships that they take them from the sea, from the Mediterranean, they have the possibility to take care of them. And practically, she's saying that the international law will not consider these people in a situation of emergency on the sea. So because the situation is growing in Europe, there is a lot of polemics about it. To me, seems strange that just a few hours ago when the Secretary General that you said is follow the situation of migrants in the Mediterranean with a lot of attention, didn't, that there was not at all in their conversation any mention on this issue. So I ask again, did they talk? Did he give any advice to the Italian Prime Minister? Because she thinks that there is not at all an international law problem here.
I don't have anything else to add to what I said yesterday. So they discussed various topics, including Ukraine and the energy crisis. And of course, the UN system remains mobilized on this issue. Do we have other questions? Yes, James.
Other questions on my list. Brittany Griner sent to a penal colony. A reaction from the UN?
Again, fair justice is nothing more to add from me on this one.
Okay. Asking for a friend here, the next one. A story about the Myanmar shadow government, means the National Unity Government, being barred from a global town hall meeting after the UN objected, apparently. I'm told this story might be untrue, so I just want clarification from you. Two representatives of the National Unity Government were barred from participating in a global town hall 2022 meeting after the last minute, after the UN complained that their inclusion would amount to taking sides. Do you have anything on that?
I'm aware. We've seen this report, and our colleagues are looking into this. So I may have an update for you later on this.
Okay. What's your reaction to the worsening violence in northwest Syria?
Hold on. So sorry. I have a real reaction. Here it is. So sorry. I have, Okay, so on this, yes, the Secretary General is greatly concerned by the recent escalation of violence in northwest Syria, including shelling and airstrikes, which has resulted in civilian deaths and casualties in and around IDP camps in Idlib Governorate. The Secretary General calls on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from escalating the situation. He calls for calm and reaffirms the need for a nationwide ceasefire as called for in Security Council Resolution 2254.
Okay, and then the last one is an update on Twitter, which doesn't seem to have a very much of a strategy beyond every few minutes. They seem to have introduced a new grey tick for official organisations and the like, and then apparently seem to have withdrawn that grey tick in addition to their blue tick. Did the UN get a grey tick at any point, and what are the updates on your conversations with Twitter, and have you found someone that continues to respond to you at Twitter?
I'm not aware of us receiving a grey tick or anything of the sort, but let me reach out to some of our colleagues who were in touch with Twitter to see if there's a new update that I could bring for you. But the latest is, of course, we're still monitoring, but I'll do a check for you.
And perhaps, can I also ask, it's flashing now, perhaps could I also ask, we've heard from the High Commissioner of Human Rights on the human rights implications of Twitter with his very strong letter. It would be useful if we get a statement or comment from Under Secretary General Melissa Fleming, because she's pushing her verified campaign, and we've not had her response to what she thinks about Twitter and the specific issues of verification on Twitter.
Happy to ask. Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you so much, everybody.